Italy is a unique country that combines the cultures of different peoples and eras. We have already covered the time of the Roman Empire in a separate video, and now it's time to talk about what awaited Italy after the end of the long Roman rule. What periods did the country live through, and what interesting things happened to it over the years? What military battles have you never even guessed about? And who was Giuseppe Garibaldi? Well, make yourselves comfortable because our big journey starts right now. And we begin with the period when the Germanic kings came to power. That's the Middle Ages. Tentatively, this period fell between 476 and 774. The first date is significant because it was in this year that the Germanic commander Odoacer overthrew the Roman Emperor Romulus Augustus and declared himself king of Italy. The period of the reign of the Germanic kings stands out from other periods of this country because it was the Germanic warlords who constantly led the country into incessant wars. Some of these military conflicts eventually divided Italy into several provincial states. In addition, the power of the Germanic kings was unstable, which affected the welfare of the population and the economic development of the region. However, despite all these problems, the period of the reign of Germanic kings in Italy is considered an important stage in the formation of statehood in the region. During this period, provincial states such as the Lombard Kingdom, Venice, Florence, the Papal Republic, Siena, and others were finally formed. Next, we should talk about one of the most beautiful periods in the life of Italy, the Renaissance. The Renaissance in Italy began in the 14th century when the country experienced a period of economic and cultural boom. Italian city-states such as Florence, Venice, Rome, and Milan became centers of new culture and science, where literature, philosophy, music, painting, and sculpture were actively developed. During this period, many famous artists and masters such as Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Raphael, Botticelli, and others created their masterpieces, which became icons of the Renaissance and symbols of the era. One of the main principles of the Renaissance was respect for individuality and human dignity, which was reflected in the art and literature of the time. Artists depicted not only gods, but also ordinary people, transforming them into beautiful, ideal images. Literature became more realistic and humanistic, reflecting themes related to nature, love, human psychology, and social life. The Italian Renaissance also had a great impact on science and philosophy. During this period, scientists began to study nature and the human body, creating new scientific theories and discovering many new facts. One of the greatest scientists of the Renaissance was Galileo Galilei, who made many discoveries in astronomy, mathematics, and physics. His contributions included determining the laws of motion and establishing the theory of heliocentrism, which brought him into conflict with church authorities. The Renaissance period also brought philosophical ideas such as humanism, which emphasized the importance of human beings, their dignity, and freedom. The philosophical ideas of the Renaissance greatly influenced the subsequent development of European culture and thought. In the 18th century, Italy became one of the main centers of the Enlightenment in Europe. This period was called the Renaissance of Science and Philosophy. There were also efforts in education. Italian universities and schools became among the best in Europe. The most important Italian philosophers of this period were Giovanni Papini, Benedetto Croce, and Giorgio Vasari. How did the country survive the New Age? The New Age period in Italy began in the late 14th century when Spain conquered Naples and lasted until the French Revolution in 1789. This period in Italy was marked by power struggles between different European nations and the strong influence of art and science on Italian culture. At the beginning of the New Age, Italy was divided into several states that were controlled by different monarchs. The most important states were Savoy, Venice, the Papal States, and Naples. These states often fought among themselves over territory, which caused Italy to become unstable and weakened. However, Italy continued to be the center of art and science in Europe. A separate mention should be given to the period of the Reformation and Counter-Reformation in Italy. The Reformation movement, which began in the 16th century against the Catholic Church, spread throughout Europe. In Italy, the Reformation received less support than in other European countries, particularly because of the powerful influence of the Catholic Church and the lack of strong feudal traditions. Despite this, however, reform movements emerged in Italy. In 1536, Pope Paul III established a commission to reform the church to correct its shortcomings and fight corruption. Some Italian priests also took part in Protestant movements, including Giordano Bruno, who was executed by the Inquisition for his ideas. In response to the Reformation, the Catholic Church launched the Counter-Reformation, which aimed to suppress heresy and strengthen the Catholic faith. In Italy, the church actively used its power to control any manifestations of heresy. The Counter-Reformation also led to a revival of Italian art and architecture, particularly the creation of a number of magnificent Catholic churches and monasteries. One of the most significant events of the Counter-Reformation in Italy was the creation of the Society of Jesus, or Jesuits, in 1540. The society was founded by Saint Ignatius of Loyola to fight the Reformation and preach the Catholic faith throughout the world. In Italy, the Jesuits focused on preaching, mentoring, and education, especially in the sciences. By the way, while we're on the subject of the Renaissance, it's worth mentioning the Baroque with Classicism. Baroque and Classicism are two art movements that became popular in Italy in the 17th and 18th centuries. Baroque was characterized by an abundance of detail, a profusion of curved lines and drama, while Classicism was more restrained and based on proportion and harmony. Baroque flourished in Italy in the 17th century, when Rome and Venice became its centers. One of the most famous Baroque artists was Michelangelo Merisi da Caravaggio, who used strong light and shadow to create a three-dimensional effect in his paintings. Another important artist was Bernini, who created many monumental sculptures such as the Pietà and the Colonnade of St. Peter. Classicism became the ideal of antiquity. Classicism became popular in Italy in the 18th century, when architects and artists began to return to the ideals of antiquity. One of the most famous classicist artists was Raphael, known for his frescoes in the Vatican and paintings such as the School of Athens and the Sistine Madonna. Both art movements in Italy were important factors in the European culture of the time. Italian artists and architects greatly influenced the development of art and architecture in other countries such as France and Spain. By the end of the 18th century, Italy was divided between different European nations such as the Austrian Empire, France, and Spain. The Great Revolutionary War, which began in 1789 and ended in 1799, led to new changes in Italy. In 1796, Napoleon Bonaparte invaded Italy for the first time and began to implement reforms to unify the country and establish the Italian Republic. He also created a constitution based on the principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity. However, in 1815, Napoleon was defeated and driven into exile, and Italy was once again divided between different states. This continued until 1861, when an Italian kingdom was created through the work of Risorgimento. Here it is important to note the name of Giuseppe Garibaldi, who, according to some sources, is considered a key figure in the process of the unification of Italy. King Victor Emmanuel II became the first king of Italy, and Turin became the capital. In 1866, Italy annexed Venice, and in 1871, Rome became the capital of the Kingdom of Italy.
This video is brought to you by Thorum. Take a look at these rings. They have rings made from 4 billion-year-old Gibeon meteorite and genuine 65 million-year-old T-Rex bone. If you are a fan of Vikings, they have Odin ring, the Norse god of war, the Thor ring, and all of them are crafted by hand. Head the link in the comments and use promo code LIVINGHISTORY to get 20% off a truly unique ring.
Well, it's time to travel back to a time more familiar to us from history books. Italy was on the side of the Entente during the First World War, entering the war against the Central Powers in 1915. Italy joined the war due to a desire to increase its territory and influence in Europe, as well as the Entente's promise to provide Italy with territorial compensation after the war ended. At the beginning of the war, the Italian army attempted to advance on the Austro-Hungarian position in the Alps, but faced stiff resistance from the enemy. The Italian army was only able to break through the Austro-Hungarian defense line in the 17th year after prolonged fighting on the Isonzo front. Nevertheless, overall, Italy was unable to make significant gains on the war front. In addition to the war effort, Italy also faced economic and social problems associated with the war. The war led to a sharp increase in the prices of food and other goods, which worsened the lives of ordinary Italians. The country's economy was also weakened due to the high costs of the war. In 1918, World War I ended with the victory of the Entente, which included Italy. The Italian army played an important role in the final defeat of the Central Powers. As a result of the victory, Italy received territorial compensation, including the provinces of Trentino and South Tyrol, as well as parts of Dalmatia and Fiume. However, the victory in the war did not lead to the consolidation and stabilization of the political situation in Italy. On the contrary, after the war, the country faced serious social and political problems, including rising unemployment, inflation, and an increase in protests and strikes. It was a very difficult time for the country. The period between the two world wars in Italy was marked by both social and political upheaval, as well as cultural and economic prosperity. In 1922, the fascist regime of Benito Mussolini came to power in Italy and established an authoritarian and dictatorial form of government. He unified the country, raised the economy and infrastructure, and restored national pride and unity. However, from the 30s onward, his regime became increasingly repressive and violent. Mussolini established control over all aspects of life in Italy and persecuted opposition and critics of his regime. All political parties except the National Fascist Party were banned, and many people were exiled and imprisoned. But nevertheless, between the two world wars, Italy also became a center of cultural development. A variety of arts, including cinema, music, and literature, flourished. The famous Cinecittà studios were established in Rome, which became one of the world's leading film production studios. Italy's music industry also reached great heights during this period. Many composers created operas that are still performed around the world today, such as Giacomo Puccini, Giuseppe Verdi, and Arturo Toscanini. However, this time was also marked by significant economic hardship. In the 30s, many Italians faced unemployment and low incomes, and economic growth slowed. In addition, in the 35th year, the Italian-Ethiopian War began, which lasted until the 36th year and led to sanctions from the international community and economic problems. Further, in the 39th year, Italy entered into a non-aggression pact with Nazi Germany, which further led to Italy's entry into World War II. The war took a heavy toll on Italy both economically and humanly. In 1943, the Allies launched an invasion of Italy, after which King Victor Emmanuel III overthrew fascist dictator Benito Mussolini and began negotiating peace with the Allies. However, after siding with the Allies, Italy faced new hardships, such as food shortages, and the general devastation of the war. In 1946, the Kingdom of Italy was replaced by a republic, and a new constitution was adopted that established democratic principles of government. Since then, Italy became one of the leading economic and cultural centers of the world. However, in 1947, the Paris Peace Treaty was signed with Italy, which reduced the reparations that the country had to pay and obliged it to return the territories that had been captured during the war. Italy also became a member of the UN and received aid from the US under the Marshall Plan. These events were the starting point for Italy's economic and social recovery. In the 1950s of the 20th century, the country began to experience economic growth, which lasted until the late 60s and was called the economic miracle. During this time, there was significant growth in industry and transportation. New jobs were created, and living conditions improved for most Italians. This economic growth was associated with the development of a number of economic sectors, such as textiles, steel production, automobile production, and many others. The introduction of new technologies and improved production efficiency played an important role in this process. Despite the successes, this period was also marked by political and social protests. The 60s saw significant social mobilization, which led to improved working conditions and wages for workers, as well as a significant expansion of civil liberties. In the 68th, Italy experienced a student revolution, which led to major changes in the educational system, as well as increased citizen rights and social security. However, already in the 70s, Italy faced a number of new problems. The country faced a crisis situation due to the oil shock, inflation, and worsening economic situation. The 78th year saw the assassination of former Prime Minister Aldo Moro, who was captured and killed by the extremist group Red Brigade. This led to a tightening of counterterrorism measures and a strengthening of the role of law enforcement agencies. Despite these problems, Italy continued to develop, and in the late 70s began to grow economically again. In addition, during this period, the country began to play a more active role in international politics and became involved in world conflicts. In the 80s, Italy faced serious economic difficulties that were caused by high inflation and large debts. The government responded with a series of economic reform measures, including cuts in public spending and lower inflation. These measures worked, and Italy's economy continued to grow in the 1990s. In recent years, Italy has faced new challenges, such as economic recession and increased immigration. However, the country is still one of the leading powers in the world in many indicators such as tourism, fashion, and design. In addition, Italy is a key player in the European Union and NATO, and is actively involved in economic issues and conflicts. Today, Italy has a highly developed economy based on industry, tourism, and services, and is the second largest producer and exporter of leather goods, footwear, furniture, and clothing in Europe. Italy also has a thriving high-tech sector, including the manufacture of computers, electronics, and automobiles. However, Italy continues to face economic and social challenges, including high unemployment, poverty, corruption, and inequality. In addition, the immigration crisis has become a significant problem in recent years, causing societal tensions and political instability. All in all, Italy continues to be an important player on the world stage, with its strengths and weaknesses, and continues to look for ways to solve its problems and strengthen its role in the world. This is Italy's history, a rich and very eventful one. Many historians mistakenly believe that Italy began with Rome, but this is not true. Even after the demise of the Roman Empire, Italy continued to be a distinctive and autonomous country with its own rich history, in which there were both dark and bright spots. See you again, folks!